Hi everyone, welcome along to another episode of LiveRem's QuickBites webinar. I'm Kathleen Weber, co-founder and CEO of LiveRem, and really excited to be back here today with another very amazing guest. Just before we jump in, QuickBites is a space where we can share knowledge, learnings, and insights on what it takes to excel in HR and business. We're keeping it short and impactful, so just a 30-minute lunch and learn style session hosted regularly by us at LiveRem. For those of you that don't know us, LiveRem gives leaders confidence in pay conversations through real-time automated salary benchmarking. I'm delighted to welcome today's guest, Heather Polaschek from Rush Digital. Welcome, Heather.
Kia ora.
Thank you for joining us. Heather is a force for driving change at Rush by championing new initiatives, developing strong leaders, and bringing her passion for implementing sustainable diversity, equity, and inclusion frameworks. She has extensive experience across the people space, having worked in multiple industries over 14 years, including public sector, telecommunications, charity, retail, and Kiwi SaaS success story, Bend. I'm really excited to talk to you today, Heather. We briefly caught up a few months ago, and I feel like we had a coffee and there was so much to say. I really enjoyed our conversation. So today's topic is all about how Heather expertly combines data-driven insights with human-centered approaches to enhance culture, drive gender pay equity, and foster employee engagement. At the end, there'll be a chance for questions, so get ready to ask those in the chat box. But before we get started, I thought I'd run a quick poll to see how many companies are using data to inform their HR strategy. Cool. All right. So we've got 67% of people are using data and 33% are not sure if they're using it or not. But that's good. So it sounds like a lot of people are using it, which is probably a good place to, I guess, start with the conversation. Heather, do you want to give us a little bit of your background? I know I've given you a pretty high level oversight, but I'm sure there's a lot more detail that you could share around, how you started in this space and what's really made you passionate about using data and how you approach your role.
Yeah. Kia ora, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for joining, and thank you for the lovely intro. Always uncomfortable having an intro about your experience, but good to provide some of the context. So I've been in HR for about 15 years, and in different spaces in New Zealand and in the UK. And one of my biggest passions actually was when I was working at a charity in London, and we did a diversity and inclusion survey. And what was really interesting was the data showed that our business was heavily weighted, as charities often are, towards white women. So over 80% of our business, 1,200 people. And then when we compared that to the data of how we were supporting people with cancer in the community, we saw that we had massive gaps in ethnic minorities and how we were able to support and inform. And so that really led to this deep passion that I have for diversity and inclusion, but also for how data informs strategies and decisions and how we drive people and culture. After that role, came back and did a long stint at Country Road Group. And what I loved about that role was we used a lot of commercial data and how people and culture and bringing in the right people leads to greater success when we compare and look at commercial outcomes. So that was great for seeing data in a different way. And then, moving to Vend really got my passion going for the tech sector, which is very, and where I am now and absolutely love, and this is me forever, is the progressiveness that we have within the tech sector and people and culture space, but also how data-driven we are. You can't go to a group of engineers and not have data and evidence and academic research to kind of back what you're driving. So there's been a nice natural kind of fit, I guess you could say.
Yeah, that's cool. Interesting that you came from that charity background, and then I guess Country Road, I'm assuming as well, would have had a heavily kind of women-based employee set. Would that be a fair assumption? And then maybe in the tech sector, not so much. Would that be true?
Yeah, and what was interesting at Country Road was, and Country Road Group, so quite a large, became kind of a $1 billion company with Woolworths as well. Very much at the top was a lot of male leaders. So despite being sort of 70, 80% female, we still saw at the top mostly men driving the key functions and in CEO roles.
Yeah.
And then, coming into tech, really interesting. The shift, I guess, towards having more men in general across tech, but then also more men in leadership, but a real passion and a drive, both at Vend and also at Rush, for wanting to get more diversity, wanting to get more Māori and Pacifica, and wanting to get more women in leadership. So the passion and the drive is there, but a lot of the time it's unsure how to do it.
Yeah, okay. And so when you started at Rush, how long have you been there now?
2.5 years, which has flown by.
Yeah, time flies when you're having fun, right? So when you started there and you walked in and I guess what was it like, and what changes have you made in your approach and working with the team around these types of gaps?
So look, when I came in, I was the only woman on SLT, and so on the senior leadership team. And so I think in my first week, and I still love to joke about this with the team, I think I made 3 comments about women in leadership in my first week to sort of set the tone of what I would like to drive in my role and what's kind of important. But one of the first things which I did with setting the people and culture strategy is obviously learn and understand the business, understand what our commercial drivers are, where are we going as a business, how does people and culture fit into that, and then what are the data and metrics to drive the decisions on where we're going to go, but also measuring the success. So one of the first things I did was sort of set my own benchmarks really around kind of 3 key areas. How are we currently doing across everything from how we're recruiting, learning and development, remuneration, gender pay, all the way through to kind of belonging and well-being. And so I knew it was really important from the beginning to be able to measure, get the data, start reporting on it, to then be able to measure, the success of the initiatives as I went on. So that was one of the key things I did to start. But a very open, willing business, everyone's super keen, loves the data, loves being data informed. We also love, which I know we'll come to, the one-on-one conversations and the qualitative stuff as well. Very open business, very people first. So it's been a beautiful place to be able to drive people and culture initiatives because everybody is so willing here, which is great. And, over time it gets, you're pushing more and more and for harder and harder change as time goes on.
Yeah, cool. That's so interesting. And interesting that you note about the openness and willingness. Has there been any points where there's been, I'm sure there has been conversations where you're presenting data around all these initiatives that you're collecting information on, and there's been pushback, or it's been harder to get across the line? What does that look like?
Probably the one that's been the most interesting is gender pay. And I think a part of that is there is a lack of knowledge around gender pay, how it's calculated and what it means. And there is this perception that it's actually around like-for-like roles. Oh, we pay well like-for-like roles, and we do. And the data that I've done since I started here shows that, we do very well within roles and we do very well within chapters. But informing what a gender pay gap is as an organisation, and then the impact of that and looking at that across New Zealand and then what we can do about it, I think those were the tougher conversations because you're having to start with a lot of information around what it actually means and why it matters, and then what can we do about it. So it took a little while, I think, for us to get into a good cadence of the conversation about it, and then to start setting some goals around women in leadership, which is what we eventually got to. We got an understanding as a team that to really drive change, we did need to set some goals and some ambitions because the data from our perspective showed that the lack of women in leadership was a big driver for that organisational pay gap. And we've reduced it over the last 2 years, but we certainly still have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, it's great to hear. We obviously have a lot of data in what we have with LiveRem, and amazingly, most companies are paying, genders, age, location, that type of thing, comparatively. So that pay parity piece is not a massive issue. In some places it is, but majority it's not. But you're absolutely right that women in leadership is, and what we see anyway, very real. And unfortunately, I think data is needed to help drive that conversation forward, because people just don't get it. And it's a hard a hard concept to get your head around when it hasn't been explained, and I think there can be some maybe some prejudices around it as well.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess sometimes there's just the explanation of, oh, well, we've tried, it's very hard. It's hard to get women in leadership. There's all these barriers to it. And yeah, things can be hard. But when we see such a large gap, and I see it, I've been doing gender pay gap analysis for a while, and I talk to a lot of people and culture. No one's got a 0% pay gap, or very few. I think it's easier for startups, which is great. But yeah, this is what it takes, right? It requires talking about it. Data helps us to have the conversation. It means that it's objective what we're talking about. It allows us to compare to other businesses. And then we need to set goals and priorities around that data, and then continue to review and measure and see the success of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And talk about it, right? We've got to talk about it to our businesses. And I think that's also really hard, because, when we first talked about sharing it, there was a bit of a resistance, because it's having a gender pay gap that's well over 8% can be hard for businesses to admit to, but a part of that transparency is really important. And that's also what drives the change, is the acknowledgement, talking about it, and then setting goals.
Yeah. You touched a little bit on ethnicity pay gaps as well. How are you looking at that, and how are you tracking that?
Yeah, that's sort of the next stage, which we're moving to now. We did a first proper diversity and inclusion survey earlier this year, where we looked at, obviously, a multitude of different diversity dimensions. And so then we will start to track it better with our HRIS, and then we will start to track it. But that isn't something that we've done well. And so we know that that's quite a gap for us. We've been focusing on women in leadership. And so we have sort of, the strategy around how we start to measure that coming up to our next annual review, now that we have ethnicity data. And also in general, our diversity strategies focused on Te Ao Māori and culture. And that's sort of a big change and pivot for us over the next year in general as well. And that's also something that we're getting much more awareness of as businesses, the importance of Te Ao Māori, particularly in this political environment. So it's something we're doubling down on.
It really comes back to, in my view, if you're serving a group of customers, if your team doesn't look like your customers, then that's going to be hard to serve.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know from all the data, right? All the data says diverse teams leads to better performing teams and better outcomes for businesses.
Yeah. So just kind of pivoting a little bit and moving into the, I guess you touched on it before, around the conversations that you have and using data to really improve the meaningfulness of those conversations. What does that look like at Rush?
Yeah, so we measure data in lots of different ways. I think one of the best ways we do is through our engagement survey, which we do every month. At first, I remember when I first started and we were doing it all the time, I was like, whoa, this is a lot of time that we're measuring this, but it's so good for having really up-to-date data. And we can see the trends of when it's up and when it's down to the mood. And, having that data at a company, at a chapter, at a team level allows us to look at what's going well. So cool, this chapter we can see is that, it's got an E net promoter score of 70. Why is that? What are they doing? Let's have a conversation with the team about what's so great. And then at the same time, the areas that aren't doing so well, trying to understand why that is. And so we can look at all the data. The data really helps. We get anonymous comments as a part of the survey too, but nothing beats that one-on-one conversation where you can really delve, probe, ask questions, but also show empathy and understand. And, sometimes it takes the face-to-face conversation for somebody to really open up and truly say how they're feeling or what's going on for them, or even give suggestions around things that we can do better. But we collect it in lots of other ways too. So it's not just driven by leadership. We have two groups within the business. One's our culture cadets. So they drive a lot of our culture and events. They're often talking to the team around how they're feeling. And then we have a belonging steering group. So both of them are groups within the business that also are regularly kind of canvassing and talking to the team about how they're feeling, what's going on, what are things we can be doing better. And we're always sharing the data. We have company syncs every week. We're trying to share the data all the time there as well. So the business is aware of all of the data, how we're performing, the stats we're taking from a people and culture point of view. And that allows them to think about that when they're being asked, how's things going? What do you want to talk about? So that's, we try to kind of tackle it from all angles.
Yeah, I'm really impressed every month. That's amazing. I actually
Mm.
haven't worked in a corporate for a while, or I've been sorry, my headphones coming out. I haven't worked in a business for ages other than my own.
Mm.
And the last time I think I did a performance thing, it was like a once a year. How do you
Yeah.
like your business? How do you like the team? It took an hour. By the end of it, you were quite disengaged. So how do you approach that? Is it just like a short, sweet survey with a few questions?
Yeah, so the survey, it takes about 5 minutes. It's about
Yeah,
20
cool.
questions. They rotate, so then it's not always the exact same questions, although there's the usual engagement questions at the start. But there's the anonymous feedback part. And what's cool about our platform is you can actually engage with the anonymous feedback, and
Yeah,
it comes back to them anonymously too. So that's really cool. But then obviously, yeah, we combine it with our other kind of, performance management. So people leaders doing great one-on-ones.
yeah.
We do quarterly performance reviews, annual 360 reviews, all kind of combining together to really allow for that two-way dialogue, which is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like then you're creating that real culture of trust where you're taking people's feedback on and then doing something about it early rather than waiting for it to fester if there is an
Yeah,
issue.
that's the thing you've got to constantly work at. Trust it's about providing that transparency when we're going through change, talking through change and why, and engaging in that feedback. And then,
Yeah.
yeah, implementing change where it's relevant, where it makes sense, and then, continuing the conversation. And, we don't always get it right. And it's about owning when we don't get it right as well, and how we can do things better, and just doing our best to keep building that trust and transparency where we can.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you have any examples of like where you've had some feedback or got some data and then that's led to a significant shift at how you do things?
It's interesting. We've been doing a lot of hiring this year after sort of a bit of a pause, towards the end of last year. And, we got quite a bit of feedback from new starters around our onboarding process, which is really interesting because also with hybrid working, we do 2 to 3 days in the office. We hadn't had such a push with recruitment where we saw the impacts of new people coming in a hybrid environment. So we've had both feedback around hybrid working and ways to improve it, as well as onboarding and how we can get people up to speed quicker. So that was through pain of some people having some tough onboarding, not feeling like they belong and part of the culture, not feeling like a sense of team. And so how do we address that? So that's been, again, a multitude of approaches, some of it initiatives with onboarding, others are kind of ongoing conversations around hybrid working and how we set the teams up for success and ensure that we're all communicating well, we're inclusive, and able to set new people up well for success and ensure there's that learning and growth as well, which is, sometimes more challenging with hybrid. So those are
Yeah.
two big things we've been talking about a lot this year.
So the hybrid working, have you always done that or has that been a post-COVID thing or?
Yeah, post-COVID. So like lots of businesses came back. I think when I started in the role, we were just sort of coming back into the office. So I got the chance to come in, and one of my first initiatives was to review what we were doing and come up with an approach to hybrid working. And we set at the time on 2 days in the office, with the rest sort of choose what you want to do. And then we review it every 6 months. So every 6 months we do a survey with our people. We're looking at engagement survey and results because, we want to make sure that people feel included and part of the team. We know that we want to make sure new people coming in feel part of the team, and that people are learning and growing, but also have that really important flexibility, especially for women in the workplace. We know how important it is to be able to keep that flexibility where we can. So, how do we keep the hybrid as much as possible? I mean, I think I'd definitely resent going back 5 days a week. Would be very difficult when you've been so used to flexibility and the trust and autonomy that comes with it. So yeah, we're constantly reviewing it. It's an evolving landscape, and needs and changes in a business our size of 80 to 90 people is always different. So we've committed to constantly review it and speak to our people about it. And yeah, that's where we sort of landed. So we're sort of two days a week, sometimes 3 for some of our leads, and that seems to be a nice mix.
Yeah, awesome. I love that. And I think it's obviously such a topical area at the moment with all the news coverage of forcing people to go back into the workplace. We've taken quite a different approach where we're 100% remote,
Nice.
which obviously brings its own challenges as well. I think Jonathan recently did a presentation at a conference on the death of the 9-to-5 workforce, and using 100% remote staff. And the number one thing we kind of got feedback from our staff on is like that lack of community. And so we really have to work on how we create that community in our team when we are literally all over the world. And so it's awesome to hear how you guys are doing that.
The advantage as well, there's so many benefits to being fully remote. The access to talent that you get and the benefit of that is huge. Plus you get to set your business up to be fully remote. Sometimes hybrid is the more difficult spot in between, because you've got to accommodate both in person and remote. And then, we've got some people that have moved out of Auckland. How do we make sure that they're included? And, culture is a constant work in progress. Nothing's ever fixed. You've got to keep working on it and improving it. And but yeah, the 9-to-5, Monday to Friday in the office, not sure about that.
Yeah, look, I signed off from that a long time ago, so I don't think I'll be hopefully ever. But hey, there's some people who love it, and that's cool as well. It's like having environments
that's right.
who want to work in that way. That's awesome. But equally those who don't or haven't or won't. And I love hearing about businesses who are doing that really well.
Yeah, that's right.
I thought I'd do one or two other questions, and then I was going to open up questions to the attendees. So if anyone has any questions, just feel free to drop them in the chat. What advice would you give HR leaders looking to integrate data and human insights into their strategy?
Yeah, I think it's probably finding the right tools is really important. You can only get good data if you've actually got tools that you're using. So what's your tech stack that it's important to you? Is it, what's your HRIS? What's your engagement tool? Do you have a, remuneration tool that you're using that helps you with that data? And, you need to start from somewhere. So sometimes we, don't try to do too much, right? You're better to start measuring what you can. Start from somewhere. You can only see improvements once you actually start measuring it, and then holding yourself to account.
Yeah.
I report to the board every month on my stats because I want to hold myself to account for it. But most importantly, you need to have the tools in place to be able to measure it. Otherwise, it's manual and difficult. And although data is important, we don't want to be spending half our week gathering the data. So finding the right tools that work for you.
And so what are you guys using?
So we use Bamboo as our HRIS. I've used that for many years. That's great. We use Peakon for our engagement. We've used 15.5 as well. And then at the moment, we're actually using a bunch of AI tools, which I have to say I'm a massive user of AI and loving that.
What does that look like?
So we, as a business, we're all using either Claude or ChatGPT, and I'm using ChatGPT as my go-to, and I've built a whole bunch of kind of company custom ChatGPTs to help the business. One area where I think it's still weak is actually REM data, because New Zealand's always typically hard to get remuneration data. But for lots of things like learning and development, creating learning content, things like that's fantastic.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. I don't have any questions at the moment, so I'll just give it one more minute from the group. Is there anything else you wanted to share? Just opening it up there for you. Always hard when it's an open-ended question.
Yeah, what is something I was going to share? Topic of data and people. Sometimes I think the balance as well is, we get this data, we talk to our people, which is, crucial, the one-on-one conversations. And then sometimes it's important to look at both. Yeah. So, you can get feedback from one person that might be, there's all these problems in the business, there's all this change we need to make. We're really worried about this, this, and this. But actually, when you look at things like your engagement data, you can see that it's not a widespread issue. So I think it's that practicality of, get the data where you can, have the one-on-one conversations, but try to look at everything holistically at the same time as well. It's about all of it combined. And so we don't want to take just the data that we're getting as gospel. Engagement doesn't always show everything. We can't just take the one-on-one as gospel as well. What's the whole view? Yeah. So I think that balance is really important.
Yeah, cool. A question is, what do you report to on the, what do you report to the board on? What kind of metrics from a people perspective?
So our strategy, our kind of overall goal of our people and culture function is to be the best workplace for ambitious tech talent. That's what we've set ourselves as the goal. And we have kind of 3 buckets under our strategy. So we want to have the best people, we want to be a high-performing culture, and we want to be a place where everybody can belong. So we've got metrics that fall under all 3 of those buckets. So we measure recruitment, our time to hire, our acceptance rate. Are we getting everybody accepting our job offers? Under high performance, we're looking at L&D. Is everybody got learning plans? Are they spending their L&D money? Because, we give $1,000 for everybody every year. And then under belonging, we're looking at engagement, well-being. What's the usage of our Southern Cross and Ignite? So those are kind of the broad things. We've got about 12 metrics under those 3 buckets that we report on every month.
Wow. And the $1,000 a year, can they use it however they like, or do they have to use it in a specific way?
Pretty much however they like, because even if people are learning in a personal project or a side project, it's still learning, it's still developing their skills. So we have a bunch of company things that we do as well. So we spend, we've got a bunch of L&D budget that we spend as a company and within chapters. And then, we have pretty much a free reign of that $1,000 every year. So at the moment, we've got a group of people actually spending it on Tadeo lessons. So there's 10 of us doing Tadeo at the moment, which is very cool. So a bunch of us have put some of our L&D into that. So we sometimes pool it as well. And learning's great. We should all be, there's always something new to learn.
Yeah, definitely. Another question is, given your staff work for different clients, how do you find it impacts engagement given the client cultures?
Yeah, very good question. That's a part of one of the most challenging things, I think, coming into a services business versus a product company. You've got your culture within your business, within your chapters, and then sometimes the culture from the client and the team that we might be working alongside. And I think the critical things that we've learned is, we do need to measure it. So how within our projects are we measuring how the team is feeling, how the client's feeling?
Yeah.
So we do a small thing called a fist of 5, which is every week or every fortnight. So out of 1 to 5, how's the team feeling? How's the client feeling? And that's a really good basic measure for us. We can see if it suddenly has been 4.5 out of 5, it's gone down to 3, what's going on within that project. But also it's all the rituals that we have along the way. So that's our way of measuring it. And then we try to set it up for success at the beginning with shared values, shared goals. And then we're measuring the success and ensuring the client's happy and the team's happy. A combination of everything. But it's definitely a challenge at times. And what's most fundamental is that we are building relationships with clients. So we're building great connection between the client and our teams, and that's the fundamental part for good engagement.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Being an ex-consultant myself, I know what it's like when you walk in to a business who's got different expectations around culture and how the way you do things. But always great when you've got the company you're working for backs you up. So it sounds like you guys are doing a really good job with that. That's cool.
We're always trying. And there's always things we can learn and always things we can do better.
That's the piece though, isn't it? Just trying and looking for new ways to do things, and sounds like listening is a huge part of what you do at Rush. So that's, really cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, well, we've got 1 minute to go, so I will wrap it up. Thank you so much for your time today. And our next webinar will be on the 28th November, and this time will actually be hosted by Jonathan Morgan, my co-founder and CTO. He'll be joined by Nat Ferguson, co-founder of PowerSuit, and the title of the webinar is Men Stepping Up, how you can help close the gender pay gap and why you should want to. So a little bit like the conversation at the very beginning of today, just looking at ways that we can actually have some really practical, no fluff conversations around why men's involvement is crucial in closing the gender pay gap, and how their actions can have real impact. So come and join us, invite your male colleagues, friends, husbands, brothers, and I think it'll be a really insightful discussion. Thanks everyone, and have a great day.